You are listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. We want to help demystify marketing to reduce risk, drive more and better opportunities, and grow your business. Are you ready to master marketing?
All right. I am Pete Monfre. Let's get into the marketing mindset, shall we? Not just any marketing mindset, the B2B marketing mindset.
Which is that much more special.
That's right. Very special. And that voiceover lady mispronounces my name ever so slightly, but she sounds nice, so we'll let it ride. Today we're going to tackle another huge subject, probably huger than we can cover here, but it's pretty controversial, and it's pay-for-performance marketing. You might think you know what that is, but I bet you don't. The idea has been around a long time, and we're regularly asked by clients to engage in this practice, and not just recently, for many, many years. But clients often have a very wrong idea of what pay for performance means, or P for P for the cool kids. And we'll talk about this more. But I think as things tighten up in the market, you're seeing more requests for this from clients that really, I think they're less concerned. I mean, they are concerned about performance, but they're really concerned about saving money. They're cutting their costs, right? And they're expecting you to essentially loan them money until somebody buys something, which they don't have control over when people buy. Why would we? But anyway.
And then Pete, and then here's the other thing. And then, so loan us money. And then, by the way, we'll take 90 days to pay you.
Right. When it comes time to pay, or maybe we won't pay you at all.
Yeah.
But I think there's so many aspects to this, and we don't want to be just ranting and screaming at the clouds. We hope that you'll all learn something from this, and there are some ways that it can work, actually, and we'll talk about that. And there's different kinds of performance marketing, and but the one that we're talking about specifically is this idea that, hey, man, why should I pay you until you've proven to me that it's going to work, right?
Yeah.
Try that with Home Depot. Be like, hey, let me take this refrigerator home, and if we like it, we'll pay. Yeah, give that a shot. Let us know how it goes in the comments. And I'll say this: back in the day, we used to be all for this idea because we knew that our work is effective. We know it works, and so if we do this properly, we as a business would make more money. The client makes a lot more money. And it really works out for everybody. But then sometimes when it comes to pay, and I've heard this a lot, let's say the program is enormously successful, the fee is going to be higher, right? And so then the client doesn't want to pay. Now you have another problem, right? So it's kind of rife with problems for both sides. So we'll talk about the pros and cons of this. But I do love the idea of having a panel on this. But there's so many issues. It just rivals Reader's Digest. Honestly, there's just so many issues. Do you get my joke?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. But let's. They would fire us off of CNN, wouldn't they, for this broadcast?
No, they wouldn't.
No, they probably wouldn't. Yeah, you're right. This is par for the course.
Why don't you could just start bashing somebody on the Republican side, and then
absolutely,
and then you'll be fine.
And we'll get to that. We'll get to that later in the program.
Okay, sure.
What is performance marketing? We've talked a little bit about what people think it is, but what is it actually? Some examples.
I can give you a couple, but I think you probably have even a different definition than I did, because even when we talked about this for the show prep, we were chatting about that. But I think it's, for the most part, you're, as an agency or a marketing firm, you're doing a lot of work up front, kind of on the come. You're hoping that whatever you do will make some results, and then whatever those results are, you and the client agree to a certain percentage of that. So you talked about it could be, the ones that I've done is revenue increases. So you go from like a $20 million company to a $25 million company. That could be something that you measure, but you reduced it down even a little bit more, just saying it could be an ad campaign and the effectiveness of that ad campaign, or it could be something else, just to promote a service or something like that. So, but
Well,
it's
what if it's
based on how well
branding?
it does.
What if it's
Yep.
branding? Like, how are you going to measure that? But there
Well,
are,
that's the age-old question, isn't it? I mean, how many times have people tried to measure all that?
right. And there's actually a lot of disruption right now going on in measurement and attribution and things that, like, for example, Apple in the way that they're not sharing data with Google, for example. I mean, the whole thing is just a mess right now. And so, again, it just heaps onto this issue. But affiliate marketing is a type of performance marketing. I think it's one of the more benign ones, but it still is the same thing. It's going to require a lot of upfront work
Yeah.
to get paid when a sale is made, right? And there's also performance advertising, right? Let's say pay per click, right?
Right.
And those companies will say, uh, we're going to get paid on how many clicks we generate. Well, that's not necessarily what the client wants. They don't care about your stupid clicks, okay? Or SEO, you're gonna pay us when we hit, third rank on Google's homepage.
Right.
That's not necessarily what the client wants. And so one of the challenges, I think, is that you got to get rid of all of these vagaries. So, and we'll talk more about the challenge of setting up performance marketing. And so, and a lot of times clients and agencies are just like, it's not worth the trouble. And so, but there are some really pragmatic problems with it that can put you out of business.
And you just mentioned something else that I think is so important. If clients want to get going on some of their marketing or trying to bring in some extra revenue, this whole process, if it's done correctly, could take 6 months to a year, in my opinion, to get it right, because there's so many, just like you said, complexities, and you said vagalities, but I was thinking you meant vulgarities, but but I mean,
Vagarities.
but it could take a lot of time just to get everything set, and you lose that momentum in the marketplace too by taking that time. So just a food for thought.
Well, it makes, the way my brain works, I thought of Sophie, this actress, Sophie Viagra. I think that's her
Oh, there you
name,
go.
is it not? Um, but vagarities, you can't have any vague uh, elements to this. And I think that it takes an enormous amount of work on the front end. And, a lot of it's there's more to it. So we'll talk a little bit about it.
For
But it's
sure.
all
Absolutely.
stick and no carrot for marketers. What I mean for that is the idea that many potential clients have is that you'll do this work for free until they judge it to be effective, and then they'll pay you what they would have paid anyway, if you're lucky, right? Um, so imagine, you're running a company and you're shouldering all the risk of that company. Let's say it's an ad agency, right?
Mhm.
That's what I'm most familiar with, marketing firms, ad agencies. Um, you've got overhead, right? You remember our office downtown Milwaukee?
I do.
We had a little bit of overhead, a little bit.
I did too.
You got employees, you've got expenses, you've got taxes, you've got insurance, you've got all of that stuff. You still have to pay that for that, however long it takes for that customer to decide that you've performed, right? How?
Right.
How do you do it? Massive lines of credit? It turns you into a bank. Aren't you loaning the client money? Right? And you're taking on the risk of their business in addition to your business. So again, stick, stick, stick. I'm waiting for the carrot, man. I'm looking for it. Trying to find it. I'm like a little bunny lost in the forest looking for a carrot. The stick for the client, which they might not be aware of, is if I've got 10 clients that are doing this with us, well, that's a ton of expenses and labor that I am floating for some amount of time. Naturally, what an agency is going to do is do the least amount of work humanly possible. They're also going to lump a lot of work on very, very few people, right? They're trying to mitigate their risk. Is that good for the client?
Or they're going to bring in a bunch of lower level employees or interns and shuffle all that work to them, which is not really good for the client. But that's, you're It's like some of our manufacturing, other people, shuffling stuff off to whether it's China or whether it's to Vietnam or others. I mean, you're trying to get your cost base as low as you can. And I'm not necessarily convinced that that's going to be good for the client if you put other people that are not the best on that client project.
Well, do you want anything less? I mean, I think the client thinks that they're going to get the same thing, but
Yeah.
it's just a different way of paying, and it's really not. You're not going to get the same thing because it's impossible. But agencies that are doing this, they're not going to tell you this because the types of agencies that do this are either stupid, sorry, stupid, or desperate, or stupidly desperate.
Or very successful, and they got a lot of money to risk or to blow, and they're willing to try something new.
I don't know any agencies like that. In a way, the Madison Avenues and the Omnicoms, when they do a pitch for business where they're doing speculative work, it's
Yeah.
similar, right? I
Right.
read that the average pitch costs an agency $425,000,
Oh, wow.
right? And they don't win all of them, let me tell you. So,
No.
but you said something interesting too. Costs, trying to manage cost. If you are doing marketing right or advertising, it should not be a cost center. It should be an investment, right?
Yeah.
Because you should be making a return on that investment. If I told you that I'm going to make you $10 for every dollar you put in, are you going to be like, I got to cut that back? I'd be trying to find money in the couch to invest in that scheme. That's assuming
Well,
it
I
was
mean,
true.
yeah. It's very interesting. I just heard a number though the other day, and I heard this is with regarding to the user experience, but I have to give credit to Jeanette Jutton, who will be on our show coming up. But she said every dollar that's invested in the user experience will return 100. So sometimes it may work out, but it's still, like you said, all of the measurement issues and everything else that goes. It's very complex, Pete.
Well, and next week we have Julia Shopich as
Oh,
our
cool.
guest, and so
There
that's
you
going to
go.
be a lot of fun. She's a kind of an amazing young person, and I'm really looking forward to talking to her. But
He's
yeah,
going to give us the young out of college perspective about marketing and PR. I think, huh?
which is sorely missing from this program is us old
Yeah.
people talk about this stuff. But we hope that our age and our experience are helpful to you, the viewer. But there's so much risk involved here. It's risk for both sides. It also causes this thing where what was what's generally a fairly simple process to engage someone becomes a very complex process, takes a long time, costs a lot of money. There's lawyers involved and contracts and details. It goes back and forth. What a
Yeah.
bunch of wasted time, right? If it's
Yeah.
just because you're trying to save money, sometimes it's because they don't trust. There's no trust,
That's
right?
it.
Now, I know for us as a company, I run across somebody that has a very low level of trust. Uh, I'm probably going to just tell them, listen, I think if you're that skeptical, that we're not a very good match for you. I mean, you can look us up all day long and see that we know what we're doing. We know, usually those clients haven't done their homework either, by the way. But if you're
Or
just
they
so
or they've been
cynical,
burnt before, and takes
all
them a
of
lot
them,
to come back. Yep.
excuse me, all of them have been burnt before, and that's one reason we do this podcast to help you avoid that, so that you don't get burned by unscrupulous marketing firms. And it happens all of the time, and part of it is making promises that they can't keep, agreeing to this sort of scheme and not being clear on the details. I mean, this is a mess in the making, but if you do get it right, it can work for both parties. We'll get to that. But I touched on this. Let's go to the next point here. Overly complex agreements and high risk for everybody. I think that, because the opposite of this would be, there's a couple things. A retainer,
Right.
but it's coupled with a scope of work.
Yeah.
It's also coupled with performance measurement. And the recourse there is you fire the agency. Like if they're not doing the job for you, you fire them, right? The other way is project. This is how we generally work: project scope, a scope of work, and then a flat fee, right?
Right.
And that is the tried and true way of buying services, not just marketing, all kinds of services. Again, I say try this. Get a drywaller over to your house and have them put up all the drywall and let them know that if you like their work, you'll pay them. See how that works out for you, right? You're paying for a service, are you not? You're paying for a result also, right? Try it.
I have a sister-in-law that just had this happen. The drywallers came and they decided to quit halfway through. so there you go.
Like a lot of marketers, actually. We hear that one all the time too. And again, these are poor examples of our profession.
Well, but that you just raised another point with regard to the complexity, whether it's a complexity agreement or it's still complex. What happens if an agency or a marketing firm decides to do this, Pete, and then all of a sudden they put 6 months in, and then the client decides to pull the trigger right before things start happening? I mean, that's kind of an unfortunate lose-lose situation too, because then all of a sudden you've done all the work and then they've stopped it. It's like they stopped it right before the bonus prize, you know?
And to be honest, this happens even under retainer agreements or other types of agreements. And that's sometimes, most of the time, it's the agency over-promising. Oh, we're gonna make this happen in 30 days. They know that's not going to happen, but they're not going to win the deal, right? Here's another thing I just thought of. A lot of times, you got to think, why would a company go out and say, we will work for free for some long period of time on the hopes that you'll pay us? Why would they do that? Right. One reason is they're not very good at communicating their value proposition, right? And so it's a lot easier to sell something that doesn't have any cost attached to it, right? Now, aren't they an advertising / marketing? I mean, isn't that what you're hiring for? That they're good at their value proposition? You just have to wonder, right? I mean, but it's just when you start putting it into place, there's so much risk, right? And I don't know if it was this version or the last version where we're supporting our overhead, we're supporting their overhead, we're taking on the risk of everybody. And usually agencies and marketing firms are small businesses; they're not big. Cash is always a problem, right? And so it's really unrealistic to think that if you're an agency and you're listening to this and you're thinking about it, go talk to your CPA and ask them how long you can stay in business, having all your people work for free and supporting all your overhead and loaning all that money to the client, right? If you're a client, ask, am I going to really get the value from this and the best quality that I can get? It's a tricky thing. So we'll get into this a little bit more, but listen, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're watching it on video, you can go to b2bmarketingmindset.com and get a lot more information on all of these topics. I think we have 100 episodes now on there. It is a treasure trove of marketing experience. If you're listening to it just by audio on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, all the major podcast platforms, Amazon, where we appear, there is video. And so today's video will be fairly jacked up, but usually it's a lot smoother. And but again, b2bmarketingmindset.com. And, I do a lot of marketing coaching. And so I love to coach people. It's not really coaching though. It's consulting, coaching, education, training. It's a lot of things, but it's something that I gravitate towards because I can help people navigate this stuff, right? And there's so many things to navigate if you're running your own company. I work with basically business owners and even people that are making the jump from like a corporate job to self-employment. There's so many things involved in, how are we going to drive customers? How are we going to drive new business? How does this work? I love helping people. And so this comes up in those assignments. And so I can help people navigate this and hopefully arrive at something that really works for everybody. But,
and that's really a worthwhile thing. So hopefully if somebody give you a call and talk to you about it or set up an arrangement, you can save them a lot of heartache and a lot of money by, spending some time with Pete, doing some of that coaching. I think it would be really worthwhile for them to give it a shot. We should have a segment on that sometime.
You should be my salesman. You should.
I'll tell you what, I will be your salesperson depending on how much revenue I can bring you in.
That's right. I ain't paying you.
That's my goal.
That is a great point, actually. maybe this is kind of where it comes from is, well, let's look at sales, right? You have
Yeah.
these positions, and I put B2B marketing mindset on the screen finally. But you have these positions that are like commission only, right? My young nephew, awesome kid, entering the workforce, and he's really a pretty good natural salesperson. He's also really good looking, which really helps. This guy's just, he got all the looks in the family. But he's taking those jobs, and there's no way that he can do a good job. And this is why the standard for sales is not commission based, it's base plus commission. And the base is not quite enough to live on, and it motivates people to meet their targets, and then they get paid. Do they just get paid the normal amount? No, they actually get paid more than they would have made before because they met their targets. That is a winning formula, right?
Yes.
It's the same formula for marketing. And so we'll get into a couple more of the problems that we'll talk about, maybe a better way. I do have a video that I could play but you won't be able to see it. So I don't know. I'll skip it for now, but it's a video from an agency that puts this out there, that they, you don't have to pay if our work doesn't succeed. It's an agency in the UK. Their website is riddled with typos, which frankly I make some typos myself. But and then even the video has some errors in it. It's the cheesiest looking crap I've ever seen. But I can't. I can play it for the audience, but I won't be able to play it for Bill. So
that's okay.
But it's just ridiculous. When you see these kinds of pitches, you really need to look into it a little deeper. And we will go into what might work. But here's one of the biggest issues of all. If I'm going to get paid on my performance, I need to be able to control every aspect of that process, right? Because my survival depends on it. I can't have you coming back and saying, I don't like that color. It doesn't seem friendly enough, and make our logo much, much bigger, right? Oh, no, I'm not doing that. My compensation depends on getting this right. We don't close sales as marketing people. What if your client can't sell their way out of a wet paper bag? What happens then?
Yeah. Or on the flip side, what happens if you are so successful for them, Pete, and they can't handle it internally, and then they start screwing up and causing all kinds of customer service issues? So, I mean, both things are bad.
What
It's
what if the product is crap?
Yeah, exactly.
What if the company itself is founded on a fundamental mismatch between product fit and market fit? Right? Yeah. How much influence do you have as a marketer, as an advertising person, over those variables? None. Okay? This is why you'd have to be completely an idiot to get into a deal where you're working for some period of time gratis on the hope of getting paid down the line. Okay? You need to really go back and talk to your college professors, because obviously we're not paying attention in business school. So there's so many things. Economics, weather. What if you're selling into the agricultural market?
Yeah.
And there's a drought and nobody's buying fertilizer. Now your agency's going out of business. Right. So it's just, man, this is a minefield. But why do we like it? Now, when I say we used to like it, don't even, if you come to me and say, hey, this is what we're thinking, and you say this, you say, hey, we're going to pay you, based on, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, goodbye. Because I have more than enough clients willing to pay for the services that we provide. And we do track things, and we do show the performance and all the same things, but it's not reasonable to expect it to be done for free. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's so many things like you were chatting about, though, that are important, but let's move on for the sake of time. And then
yeah, I'm on a soapbox. I got to get off this soapbox, man.
That's okay.
It's hurting my feet.
The only thing I was going to say with regard to control is, along those same lines, what happens if something happens that's out of your control as the agency or the marketing firm and the client's term, but it's positive, and all of a sudden it makes you really need or want their product or service, again, somebody's going to argue, oh, that's not fair. You had nothing to do with that. Well, hey, I
Right.
increased those revenues like the agreement. So, I think to your point, it's complex. There's a lack of control. There's stuff that we can't control. I just think it's very difficult.
And again, if we could find a way to do this, it would be awesome for those agencies that perform, right? We'd
Yeah.
love this because
Yeah.
we'll talk about a better way to do it here next. But so often, just in regular agreements, there's influence that marketing has that turns into revenue for the client. But because it doesn't come through with the normal attribution models, they don't want to give you credit for it, right? Oh,
Yeah.
our sales guy found that person and closed that deal. Well, maybe that person was seeing ads, seeing the blog, speaking engagements, content, but maybe they just didn't mention all that. So it's like, hey, it's called last click attribution. So whatever
Right.
the last thing that they saw was, that's where the client, people think, oh, that's where it came from. And if
Yes.
you're not the company that did that, you're not going to get paid for that. So maybe this episode is for other marketing firms out there, right? I don't know, but we just thought it would be an interesting topic. So let me
Or hang on a second. You're right.
flipping
Maybe
things
if
here.
it's other marketing people and they have a client that wants them to do that, maybe they'll tell them, you need to watch this podcast, and then
Hey,
they'll know all. Yeah.
well, here's also the thing. If you're a marketer out there, you disagree, you've had success with this model, give me a
Come on.
call. Let's have you on the program. If you're a client
Yeah.
that's had success with this model, let's have you on the program, right? We are certainly willing, even at this age, to learn. And so,
Or hear both sides. I think that's true.
we still might not learn. You're right. We might just hear both sides and still be like,
Yeah, I'm not going to learn.
at
I'm too
least
old
you're
for that.
honest. Yeah. Every new thing I learn pushes something old out. So it's really,
forget it.
all of a sudden I
Forget it.
forget to brush my teeth, right? I don't know how to do it because I learned some, I don't know. But let's talk about how this could work. So
Okay.
the classic idea is this: work for free until we see results, usually vague. Here's how it could work. At least according to best practices, here's how it's supposed to work. The agency will charge, I always say agency, but I just mean firm. Could be a consulting firm, could be an ad agency, could be anything. They bill essentially their cost, and sometimes they forego their profit margin, or they bill their cost and then a very small profit margin, right? And then the difference, when certain milestones are met that are very specifically agreed to by both parties, and that does take time and effort and money to even enter into this, then they get paid not just the difference up to their normal margin, but they actually get paid more for the risk that they're shouldering, just like an investment, right? More risk, more reward. That's what clients hate. They're like, oh, this is working really good. How much is this gonna, But if you just made an extra $5 million that you wouldn't have made otherwise,
Right.
is that 80 grand or whatever that commission is? That's 80 grand and 5 million you didn't have before. But I think that's where the greed comes in, right? We're not paying that. And this happens. I wish I could say it happens often. In my experience, it happens every single time. If you can get past the initial hurdles, when it comes time to be rewarded for your work, and somehow pay all of the interest that you racked up in supporting your company while you're doing this, now you have problems collecting. But that is the way. Is that your experience?
And one of the things that I suggested when at one time we had 15 employees, but one time I asked my employees, I said, and it wasn't a marketing related thing. It was a client of ours that had a new product, and they wanted us to market them like this, And so I went to each of my employees and I said, whoever wants to be involved, if you think this is a good idea, this would be on our own time. But maybe we can all share in this. And by the way, I think a couple of employees were into it, but most said no way. So I mean, that's another possibility, but it's still, there's just too much, I think, on the downside.
It puts their employment at risk if they're thinking through it. I mean, what if this goes bad? Let's say you have 4 clients on this program, and 3 of them don't pay off.
Right.
How are you going to get through that? So, what we prefer as a company, We like to have detailed scopes of work,
Yes.
timelines,
Yep.
performance indicators, and a flat fee. That is a fee that isn't going to change.
That's very clear on how you're going to get paid. That's right.
Absolutely. And we get paid in advance. Now, that's a controversial thing, and a lot of people don't like it. But here's the thing. We're not a bank, all right? We're not here to loan you money. If you can't afford it, then don't do it, right? But if we could extend credit to people, we certainly would. We're a very small company, and we just don't do that. And that policy, by the way, is for everyone. You could be a mom and pop, Fortune 100, doesn't matter. That is our policy. That probably lost me a lot of business right there, but I don't care. That's the way it is. There's also retainers, but not the traditional retainer like you might pay an attorney, and then if you don't use the attorney, you have to still pay. That's not really how the marketing world works. It's usually tied to some number of hours that are put aside, and that guarantees you access to that agency when you need them, right? And that agency should be proactive in being there for you. It's not a passive thing. But these are tried and true ways. And look, there's risk in business, right? There's risk, right? If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. We'll skip our final thoughts for today because we are running late because of our technical problems earlier. But do you have any? They'll say, Bill, what are your final thoughts on this? As they say, we're going to skip it.
It's always fun, and I think that hopefully the audience knows that we always bring up, I think, interesting topics, whether they learn some things, grow from it, or maybe it's something controversial. I think it's always good, and hopefully expand the discussion and education. And I think one of my takeaways for today is they need a coach. So they should be giving you a call and talking to you about some of the things that you can help them with.
Well, if you're not certain, look, we're always here to help you anyway, whether you hire us or not. So I mean, if you're thinking about this stuff, you want to talk about it, we're happy to share our experience. There are some ways to do it. It is complex. It is time consuming. You may not like it when it's all said and done, but there are definitely some ways. And I don't know, I'll give it the benefit of a doubt. Maybe it could work for some folks. It doesn't work for us. Never has. We've tried it many, many times. And like I said, we're proponents of it. We love it. But we would do all that work setting it up, and then the client would see what's in, for example, audit power. Like you need access to their books, right? They don't like that either. And so it usually falls apart. You don't win the client anyway. It's just a mess. And so anyway, tune in every week. In over 100 episodes, I think we've had technical problems maybe twice. And so something was going on there. But thank you all for tuning in, whether you're doing it live or whether you're doing it later. And again, come see us at b2bmarketingmindset.com. We try to keep it lively. And you keep it lively out there as well. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Always fun.
You've been listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. Add to the conversation by commenting, sharing, and liking. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the links in the comments. Learn more at b2bmarketingmindset.com.